One afternoon, when his day's work was over, Fetz dropped into a popular tavern and found McFarlane sitting with a stranger. This was a small man, very pale and dark, with coal-black eyes. The cut of his features gave a promise of intellect and refinement which was but feebly realized in his manners, for he proved, upon a nearer acquaintance, coarse, vulgar, and stupid. He exercised, however, a very remarkable control over McFarlane, issued orders like the great Bashaw, became inflamed at the least discussion or delay, and commented rudely on the servility with which he was obeyed. This most offensive person took a fancy to Fetz on the spot, plied him with drinks, and honored him with unusual confidences on his past career. If a tenth part of what he confessed were true, he was a very loathsome rogue, and the lad's vanity was tickled by the attention of so experienced a man. "I'm a pretty bad fellow myself," the stranger remarked, "but McFarlane is the boy. Toddy McFarlane, I call him. Toddy, order your friend another glass. Or it might be, Toddy, you jump up and shut the door. Toddy hates me," he said again. "Oh yes, Toddy, you do." "Don't you call me that confounded name," growled McFarlane. "Hear him. Did you ever see the lads play knife?" "He would like to do that all over my body," remarked the stranger. "We medicals have a better way than that," said Fetz. "When we dislike a dead friend of ours, we dissect him." McFarlane looked up sharply, as though this jest was scarcely to his mind. The afternoon passed. Gray, for that was the stranger's name, invited Fetz to join them at dinner, ordered a feast so sumptuous that the tavern was thrown in commotion, and when all was done, commanded McFarlane to settle the bill. It was too late before they separated. The man Gray was incapably drunk. McFarlane, sobered by his fury, chewed the cud of the money he had been forced to squander and the slights he had been obliged to swallow. Fetz, with various liquors singing in his head, returned home with devious footsteps and a mind entirely in abeyance. Next day, McFarlane was absent from the class, and Fetz smiled to himself as he imagined him still squiring the intolerable Gray from tavern to tavern. As soon as the hour of liberty had struck, he posted from place to place in quest of his last night's companions. He could find them, however, nowhere, so returned early to his rooms, went to bed early, and slept the sleep of the just. At 4 a.m, he was awakened by the well-known signal. Descending to the door, he was filled with astonishment to find McFarlane with his gig, and in the gig one of those long and ghastly packages with which he was so well acquainted. "What?" he cried. "Have you been out alone? How did you manage?" But McFarlane silenced him roughly, bidding him turn to business. When they had got the body upstairs and laid it on the table, McFarlane made at first as if he were going away. Then he paused and seemed to hesitate. And then, "You had better look at the face," said he, in tones of some constraint. "You had better," he repeated, as Fetz only stared at him in wonder. "But where, and how, and when did you come by it?" cried the other. "Look at the face," was the only answer. Fetz was staggered. Strange doubts assailed him. He looked from the young doctor to the body and then back again. At last, with a start, he did as he was bidden. He had almost expected the sight that met his eyes, and yet the shock was cruel. To see, fixed in the rigidity of death and naked, that coarse layer of sackcloth, the man whom he had left well clad and full of meat and sin upon the threshold of a tavern, awoke, even in the thoughtless Fetz, some of the terrors of the conscience. It was a crash TB, which re-echoed in his soul, that two whom he had known should have come to lie upon these icy tables. Yet these were only secondary thoughts. His first concern regarded Wolfe. Unprepared for a challenge so momentous, he knew not how to look his comrade in the face. He durst not meet his eye, and he had neither words nor voice at his command. It was McFarlane himself who made the first advance. He came up quietly behind and laid his hand gently but firmly on the other's shoulder. "Richardson," said he, "may have the head." Now, Richardson was a student who had long been anxious for that portion of the human subject to dissect. There was no answer, and the murderer resumed. "Talking of business, you must pay me. Your accounts, you see, must tally." Fetz found a voice, the ghost of his own. "Pay you?" he cried. "Pay you for that?" "Why, yes, of course you must. By all means and on every possible account you must," returned the other. "I dare not give it for nothing. You dare not take it for nothing. It would compromise us both. This is another case like Jane Galbraith's. The more things are wrong, the more we must act as if it were all right. Where does the old K keep his money?" "There," answered Fetz hoarsely, pointing to a cupboard in the corner. "Give me the key, then," said the other, calmly, holding out his hand. There was an instant's hesitation, and the die was cast. McFarlane could not suppress a nervous twitch. The infinitesimal mark of an immense relief. He felt the key between his fingers. He opened the cupboard, brought out pen and ink and a paper book that stood in one compartment, and separated from the funds in a drawer a sum suitable to the occasion. "Now, look here," he said. There is the payment made. First proof of your good faith. First step to your security. You now have to clinch it by a second. Enter the payment in your book, and then you, for your part, may defy the devil." The next few seconds were, for Fetz, an agony of thought, but in balancing his terrors, it was the most immediate that triumphed. Any future difficulty seemed almost welcome if he could avoid a present quarrel with McFarlane. He set down the candle which he had been carrying all the time, and with a steady hand entered the date, the nature, and the amount of the transaction. "And now," said McFarlane, "it is only fair that you should pocket the lucre. I've had my share already. By the by, when a man of the world falls into a bit of luck, has a few shillings extra in his pocket, I'm ashamed to speak of it, but there's a rule of conduct in the case. No treating, no purchase of expensive class books, no squaring of old debts. Borrow, don't lend." "McFarlane," began Fetz, somewhat hoarsely, "I have put my neck in a halter to oblige you." "To oblige me?" cried Wolfe. "Oh, come. You did, as near as I can see the matter. what you downright had to do in self-defense. Suppose I got into trouble, where would you be? This second little matter flows clearly from the first. Mr. Gray is the continuation of Miss Galbraith. You can't begin and then stop. If you begin, you must keep on beginning. That's the truth. No rest for the wicked. A horrible sense of blackness and the treachery of fate seized hold upon the soul of the unhappy student. My God, he cried, but what have I done? And when did I begin? To be made a class assistant in the name of reason? Where's the harm in that? Service wanted the position. Service might have got it. Would he have been where I am now? My dear fellow, said MacFarlane, what a boy you are. What harm has come to you? What harm can come to you if you hold your tongue? Why, man, do you know what this life is? There are two squads of us, the lions and the lambs. If you're a lamb, you'll come to lie upon these tables like Gray or Jane Galbraith. If you're a lion, you'll live and drive a horse like me, like Kay, like all the world with any wit or courage. You're staggered at the first. But look at Kay. My dear fellow, you're clever. You have pluck. I like you. And Kay likes you. You were born to lead the hunt. And I tell you, on my honor and my experience of life, 3 days from now, you will laugh at all these scarecrows like a high school boy at a farce. And with that, MacFarlane took his departure and drove off up the Wynd in his gig to get under cover before daylight. Fettes was thus left alone with his regrets. He saw the miserable peril in which he stood involved. He saw, with inexpressible dismay, that there was no limit to his weakness, and that, from concession to concession, he had fallen from the arbiter of MacFarlane's destiny to his paid and helpless accomplice. He would have given the world to have been a little braver at the time, but it did not occur to him that he might still be brave. The secret of Jane Galbraith and the cursed entry in the daybook closed his mouth. Hours passed, and the class began to arrive. The members of the unhappy Gray were dealt out to one and to another, and received without remark. Richardson was made happy with the head, and before the hour of freedom rang, Fettes trembled with exultation to perceive how far they had already gone towards safety. For 2 days he continued to watch, with increasing joy, the dreadful process of disguise. On the third day, MacFarlane made his appearance. He had been ill, he said, but he made up for lost time by the energy with which he directed the students. To Richardson, in particular, he extended the most valuable assistance and advice, and that student, encouraged by the praise of the demonstrator, burned high with ambitious hopes, and saw the medal already in his grasp. Before the week was out, MacFarlane's prophecy had been fulfilled. Fettes had outlived his terrors and had forgotten his baseness. He began to plume himself upon his courage, and had so arranged the story in his mind that he could look back on these events with an unhealthy pride. Of his accomplice he saw but little. They met, of course, in the business of the class. They received their orders together from Mr. K. At times they had a word or two in private, and MacFarlane was from first to last particularly kind and jovial, but it was plain that he avoided any reference to their common secret. And even when Fetch whispered to him that he had cast in his lot with the lions and had forsworn the lambs, he only signed to him smilingly to hold his peace.